we made it. Okay, Hazel.
Hi.
We made it finally. How was dinner?
It was good, yeah. Had a great dinner. It's a bit rushed, but it was fine.
What did you have for dinner, Hazel?
I had sweet potatoes, salad, and salmon.
Sounds like a funky mix.
Really?
Well, I mean, salmon.
Classic mix, that.
Yeah. Okay, quick intro to Hazel Findlay. Hazel is one of those people who do seem to be like a childish monkey. She kind of started, as far as I know, at home, bouldering on door frames, and please correct me if I'm wrong. And
Yeah.
when did that start, Hazel? What time? What age?
Well, my dad got me into climbing when I was like 5 or 6 or something. So that, like, at first that meant just like scrambling around on random bits of rock, and then he like taught us how to do the proper safety stuff and climb with ropes and all of that kind of thing. I went to the wall, but yeah, it's sort of like a mix of outdoor and indoor climbing.
Yeah.
But my parents were divorced, so I climbed a lot on my own as well, like in the gym. So it's a bit of a mix, really, of all of the different ways you could get into climbing.
But tonight, we're not going to talk about climbing in specific. We're going to talk about other stuff. Yeah, because I you know what I was really looking forward to when you kind of told me you're keen for this kind of idea of doing this live, I realized, well, Hazel's got a lot more stuff to offer instead of just talking about your latest ascents, your hard routes, you know, your multi-pitching and all that stuff. And I was super happy to kind of talk about this, because one of the reasons why I'm doing this show is, apart from being terribly bored with myself, is I just felt like that some things, some areas of climbing, maybe also as a metaphor for life, have been slightly overlooked. And for example, psychology, states of emotional aspects, you know, and basic emotions like fear. And I was super happy when I realized that I got the chance to talk to you. So that's what we're doing tonight. And we're trying to focus this mainly not on the aspect into climbing. For me, it would be more helpful, or more, let's say, better, because I see, for myself, for example, I see climbing as a chance to tune into my own life and use it as a metaphor. So, and we're gonna build this up. You know, the idea tonight is we're gonna do 3 chapters, and we're gonna start with the first chapter. And the first chapter is fear, and the conquest of fear. A very deep thing. I mean, this is the funny part, because you said to me before, you know, yeah, let's talk about psychology, you know, but you know, these things are very close to philosophy and metaphysics. So let's try to keep it on psychology terms, but ultimately, you know, I think we're going to end up probably talking in different areas, and I think you're quite the right person for that. Fear, Hazel.
Okay.
What's fear for you?
Fear. Well, I feel like it's probably something felt in the body, like all the other emotions. And it's usually you're scared of something. So that's sort of why people use the term anxiety, isn't it? Because you can kind of like be anxious, but you don't know why you're anxious. Like, you're not necessarily anxious of something. You might just have like underlying anxiety. But then fear is usually of something. So it's sort of like conditional on something, but that thing can be perceived. And usually it's about something that's not happened yet. So, you know, you might be scared of getting coronavirus. So you've got this like negative emotion, which is probably paired with negative thoughts as well, and about the thing that you're scared of. But it's kind of an interesting phenomenon for me because that thing hasn't happened to you yet. So it's like if you were a perfectly rational being that wasn't swayed by kind of like emotions that aren't useful for you, then you would just not let that negatively affect you, right? You would just use it for its use as like an indication that there's like a threat or whatever, and then you'd go about your life. But as humans, we're kind of like fallible, aren't we? So then we become scared in a way that is not serving us anymore, and then that's when we need to manage it.
So fear from a perspective of climbing. Let's just talk about climbing, because I mean this is something we both probably can relate to, and we have a common basis because we both climb. How would you control that? How would you control the aspect of failure? How would you control the aspect of imagining that things might go wrong?
Well, I guess, there's lots of different types of fear
Yeah.
in climbing. I think the main ones are fear of failure, as you've mentioned,
Yeah.
and fear of falling.
Yeah.
They're kind of like the two big ones, and then performance anxiety comes alongside fear of failure. And there's fear of what other people think as well, which fear of failure often boils down to fear of what other people think. So I want to do my project, or I'm scared to not do my project because I'm scared of what that looks like in the eyes of others. So it's like we're such social creatures, right? Like our status is so dependent on our so-called achievements and how we perceive ourselves as matching up to the others around us, like where we put ourselves in a social hierarchy. And people always go like, oh, but isn't that just elite climbers? That's just elite climbers that do that because they have all these expectations on them. But as a coach, I hear the ins and sort of the internal worlds of many climbers, from people who've been climbing only a year and they only climb like 5B or 5.8 or something, right up to elite level climbers, and we all have the same concerns. Like if you're in your group of climbers and all of you climb around 5.8 and then you don't do the 5.8 that everyone expects you to do, that's just as bad as some elite climber not on-siting the 8A that you were expected to on-site. So, and I think that this fear of what other people think and the anxiety and like, or I should say like the damage to our perceived self-worth. So like, how I perceive myself and my ego and my self-worth, it's so easy to kind of tie that up with climbing. So like the better I do, the bigger my ego gets, and the worse I do, there's this threat to my ego. And it's not that my ego gets smaller, it's almost that it gets bigger even without achievement, but it feels threatened, and we cause ourselves so much suffering in like this chase for achievement. And then when we don't get it, we suffer. But also when we do get the achievement with the wrong mindset, we also suffer. So it's like, it's all very interesting, but they're kind of the big fears, I think. And then fear of falling, which is a bit of more kind of visceral, like evolutionary fear, I think. It's a bit like the discomfort a lot of us feel if a spider were to crawl on our neck or something. It's this real like survival instinct, like we did not get primed to fall through the air and then be caught by a really thin rope, right? Just evolution tells us that that's not a good idea. And I think people forget that too. They forget that we're probably weren't made, or our psychology wasn't resilient to something like falling. And that's why we kind of have to like train ourselves through habituation to get comfortable with it.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about Maslow now and habituation and the options of extinction. So these are psychological terms. But I want to really stay now on the We're gonna go into the falling part in a minute, but I really want to pose the performance failure or the fear of performance, because I believe, and I totally agree with you from my perspective, that this is a big issue. I mean, for me, for example, I used to climb like rather alone. I used to just rather travel to places with either my friends or just alone. Bolting trips were mainly just based on the idea of like, where can I get to when nobody's watching me, apart from, you know, someone else which might be watching over me, which is metaphysics. But the question is like, why did I choose to do that? On one hand, you know, it's really interesting, because my answer to that on one level would be, yeah, because I didn't have to worry. I didn't have to worry about, you know, getting observed from the outside. I could just be free, and this was a really nice state to be in. But then when I started to climb with people again, and people I wouldn't know especially, I get into this really funny state of going like, oh, you know, this is a really odd place. You know, everybody's like, and if you have an extrovert mentality or personality, for example, you just want to perform, but you also feel like, I felt like, you know, oh, this is bollocks. You know, like, why do I have to feel like someone is watching me? Because ultimately, like, the value of my achievements or the value of my trying should be enough instead of other people watching me. And this is a super complex issue, because, you know, in general, like, I think it's so sad, because my opinion is, or my experience is, that once that falls away, once you stop judging yourself on the basis other people are watching you, and they might judge you, they might not even judge you, but they might judge you, things become a lot easier.
Say the last bit again. It becomes a lot easier if
Well,
you...
it becomes a lot easier when you let go of the thought of being watched.
Yeah. Because usually people are so busy worried about how others perceive them that they've got no mental space to even perceive you.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
so yeah, but it is good to let it go for sure. But I also like to remind myself that people are probably too bothered about themselves and how they feel judged to judge you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a mind game. To be honest, I think it's a vicious circle. It's like something which might not even be there, but you're imagining it. Therefore, it becomes really big in your mind, and then you think like, "Fuck, man, I have to try harder." But ultimately, like, your body tells you like, "Come on, man, just enjoy." I mean, just enjoy the pure movement on rock. Just enjoy the experience you might just be given right now, and just be in the moment. And that might mean fight till the end, or that might mean just let me lower down. I mean, there's a really interesting story of, I read John Gill's book, which I'm gonna put in a minute, also like something out, Yvonne Joynard, there's a quote from Yvonne Joynard. But the thing was like, John Gill explains one bouldering session, which he kind of, in the book, Master of Rock, you know, he explains the best bouldering session he had was, he ended up going to one of the boulders he really liked, he sat down, he found a $20 note sitting next to him, and then he was like sitting there, he picked up the money and he left. He didn't even climb. And he said then, in the book, he describes it as, this was one of the best bouldering experiences I had. Like, what? Like,
That's funny.
Yeah.
That's really funny. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the way I look at it, what did you call the book? What was the name of the book?
Master of Rock. I mean, this is from Pat Ament. Pat Ament. This is this book here. It's a book where it's a very old book, obviously, because John Gill is in his 80s now, and it's more or less not an autobiography, but it's more or less people who met John Gill, and then they give a statement about him, how they experienced him as a climber, or what he did, you know. So.
Okay. John Gill, yeah, I don't know him actually. But this idea of mastery, I mean, I don't know the book, I don't know him, but it's like, if you take away the idea that you're kind of like, you want to compete with others, and that's like your motivation, right? So like extrinsic motivation. So it's like the reward of your kind of peers thinking well of you, and you know, that's kind of like your motivation. And it sounds silly, but this is
No. Honestly, I've been through this. I'm still working on it.
Yeah. And but then you sort of take that away and you go, oh well, why should I climb hard? Like, what is the thing that's going to drive me if not that? And then my answer is always just mastery. Like, I just want to master the sport of rock climbing in any way to whatever level I can, right? And I think that there's like an intrinsic enjoyment in that. And it's like in somehow in our Western culture, we've like lost that. Like we only ever do things to kind of like achieve. We don't just do them to be like, we say things like MasterChef, but like MasterChef just means like getting a TV program. It doesn't really mean mastering the art of cooking or whatever, right?
Mm.
Um, and so I think we really have lost that. Like people don't do things just to be kind of like a master in their craft anymore. And I think it's sad. I'm like trying my best for that to do that. And it's like every day it's like a battle in some sense, but it's also like it's also easy. It makes things easier in a lot of sense. If you can walk to the crag and you go, this is just another day practicing my craft, you know? And if you can say that to yourself, it means you don't have to prove anything to anyone. It doesn't mean you have to actually achieve anything. You can, because everything's practice, right? Like every move you make is going to help you be better at your craft. um, so
Um,
yeah, that's what I use as kind of like that's the mindset I want to have, the mindset of a master, like sort of like the old kung fu fighters or whatever. Like they mastered jujitsu or something, and it wasn't to beat their opponent; it was to just be the master of their mind and body in this context of fighting or opposition sport or whatever.
so we ended up metaphysical and philosophical anyways.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just adjusting myself. I want to
No,
put my
no,
legs
no.
up.
Get comfortable. Get comfortable. You just mentioned the fact that martial arts, for example, has an impact, or like had an impact maybe on sports and sport and mental awareness. I mean, there's a very famous interview with Bruce Lee, and they are talking about mastery to an extent, and he just says, "Be like water." What comes in? What
Mm.
comes into your mind when someone like this says, "Be like water"?
Well, I think he's referring to flow state. So, um, it's about that kind of intuitive capability that we have when we like fully trust our bodies and our experience, and we just respond to what's coming next in the most efficient way, which is kind of what water does, right? Water like flows through the landscape in it's like most efficient way. And we could flow up the rock like through the path of least resistance. So it's really just like a metaphor for that like hyper efficiency that you get when you're in flow state. That's what I think of anyway.
Yeah, I mean, this is a concept posed by Csikszentmihalyi. I mean, whoever whoever can speak out his name.
Chick,
Uh,
chick sent me high.
Csikszent.
Mihaly chick sent me high.
Yeah.
Do you remember this? Chicks sent me high.
No, I do remember this, but I mean, in general,
Oh.
it's springtime, Hazel, so it's a complicated matter, you know.
That's how I remember it anyway.
Yeah, well, chick sent me high, man. Uh, Mastery of oneself, flow, water, flexibility, adaptability, fluid. You know, I mean, for me, fluidity or water is an incredible force. I mean, we have Earth Day. I mean, there is supposed to be a glowing Earth behind us. Hazel can't see it because the webcam is not the same cam I'm doing the show on. Do you think that this flow state is possible all the time? Do you think that as a climber or as a person who performs, who uses their body in any way, I mean, this could be just a normal option of walking, a normal option of breathing, do you think it's easy to get to that stage?
Well, not really actually, because well, I guess first, like flow states on a kind of scale. So like you can have really absorbed, intense flow moments, and then you can have like lesser. You can be less absorbed. Um, but the main thing with flow, and this is where it's different from something like mindfulness, is that it you have to be challenged to and to quite like there is a range, but it's not that big a range. Like if you are in any way bored or under challenged, or you're in any way over challenged, physically or mentally or technically, you won't be in flow. So you, unless you kind of add challenge artificially, you can't really be in flow walking down the street. But if someone said to you like walk down the street, but like walk as fast as you can, but still walking, or like walk as gracefully as you can, or walk like only on this bit of your like if they added challenge like that, then maybe you could find flow walking down the street. But when people say that they find flow walking down the street, I don't know if they know what flow means, or they're confusing it with mindfulness, which is just to be present. So it's like it's kind of confusing really, but like flow state, you're present, but it's not the same mental state as you would be if you were like meditating or looking at a beautiful view or whatever, you know?
I know. I mean, I guess in general, um, I don't know if, well, maybe Buddha would know, but I mean, walking around, being in a flow state, just walking would be probably not. I mean, for me, it's like because I studied PE, sports science and stuff a bit. So an automated system which runs in the body, like walking, might be to an extent not very. It might be economical, but it also might not be. So it's just a state of like you've been telling your body this is what you have to do. You have to go from A to B. You have to be as efficient as you can. Sometimes your back hurts. Sometimes your foot is a bit crook. So you end up just kind of walking. But I mean, I think what you just said is really interesting because the challenge and the level of pressure from the outside might just be like shit weather, rain, slippy surface, or it might just be like a climb which is quite tricky. Might put you in the spot that you have to let go in order to get it. This is like super, I mean, we're talking it's quite a paradox, I think.
Yeah, there's quite a few paradoxes in flow state. And one of them is this letting go. It's like you have this feeling of perfect control. So you're like every move will be exactly right and you feel really in control and it feels almost like automated. But
Yeah.
yet you also have to like let go. And letting go is usually associated with losing control. So it's like a bit of a paradox, but um I think letting go is also akin to trust. And I
Yeah.
think you definitely need to trust um, yourself to access flow. As soon as self doubt enters the equation, you're not going to be in flow. Um, so, yeah.
This reminds me actually. I had Johnny Dawes coming over to Germany about 2-3 years ago. I did a coaching session with some people in a gym, in a bouldering gym in Germany, and I liked his way of coaching because he kind of just said to the people, just imagine yourself how it feels to be at that hold later. Just feel into it, and then get to that spot, and once you got the feeling, just do it. And the funny thing was, it's more or less about the way Johnny, for example, describes it. He says like your body doesn't know what he has to do because your body is in full control, but you just have to trust yourself that you let your mind go and go like, this is actually possible, this is actually feasible, and let go of all the outside. For example, outside people judging you, yourself judging yourself, and then just do it. And then it's just a decision. It's a really weird situation because it's a decision just to go like, well, I can do it. And it's for me, for example, the most accurate explanation to put it in words is like it's a leap of faith. It's just a way of just doing it, and actually trusting your body that your body will actually just follow what you've just been trusting.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess the only caveat to that would be that you might do that and still not do it. Just
But
because there's some moves you can't do, yeah.
yeah, but that's
But the
nice. I mean,
main thing is just trying with full commitment, right? But I really like that idea of kind of like imagining yourself already there. I like that. Johnny's got good ideas like that, and I think he really understood movement from like people teach movement, but what they're really teaching is technique drills because movement comes from the mind. And so and you can't talk about movement. You can't really teach movement without talking about attention. Like where is my attention when I do this kind of movement? What is my mind telling my body to do? And if you miss that link, you just miss it all because your body doesn't do anything without your mind, does it? So like, yeah, I don't know. It's just weird how we think about technique and movement. And I think Johnny Dawes was onto something in a lot of ways, in the ways he speaks about movement.
yeah. Let's talk about fear of falling and habituation. I mean, this is something you're a coach, you do mental training, you do coaching with people. I mean, what's special about fear of falling, and how do you kind of work on that?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting actually because I'm doing all these talks at the moment on fear of falling,
Oh,
and it's really cool. Like, I just think there's so many people suffer from fear of falling, and there's so much at stake. Okay, so like everything we've spoken about like all of these states of climbing, completely absorbed in the moment, these like joyful states, like often those are the moments of why we keep coming back to climbing, right? Like even if you get like one moment like that can change your week. Um, you can't have that if you're scared of falling. You can't be in the moment when you're climbing if you're scared of falling, which means you can't enjoy it as much. It also means you won't progress very well because you will never be climbing at your limit other than if maybe on top rope, or if you're not scared of falling in bouldering, maybe you do so bouldering, but it doesn't matter what training gains you make in uh, in bouldering or like just training in general. Like if you can get crazy strong fingers, but if you don't climb to your limit, you're not using your finger strength potential. So you won't progress as quick and you won't enjoy it as much. So and it affects so many people. Like it's so funny to me how there's just like endless climbing videos about how to get stronger and fitter when the biggest weakness facing most people is fear of falling. And it's just all going to waste. It's like people are training for nothing because they get on the rock and they say take on their project
yeah.
instead of going all out and trying their hardest. Um, so it affects a lot of people and there's a lot at stake. And the only way to really get over it is by doing fall practice. But a lot of people do fall practice wrong. I don't know if you want me to go into the details, but there's ways that you make it worse, and there's a lot of bad advice out there. And but the main thing is you need to do full practice, but you need to do it in the right way. The main thing I'll just say is that it has to be graduated exposure. So full practice is a kind of exposure therapy where you kind of gradually increase your exposure to this stressful stimulus, which is falling. So people like think they should be able to take a certain length of fall. So they'll repeat a few small falls and they'll be like, well, I should be able to go from there because it's safe and da-da-da. But it's just the brain doesn't work that way. So I like have a few analogies, but like, so say for example, you had like a fear of spiders. You wouldn't like jump in a bath of spiders and hope that your phobia would go away. Like that's just not something you would ever be doing. So when you go with a fear of falling and you go and take a big fall, that's what you're doing. You're not gradually getting used to spiders slowly. You're literally jumping in a bath of spiders, and like that would be like a nightmare scenario for most people who are scared of spiders, right? And that would increase their trauma. It would suffer a trauma and it would increase their fear around spiders. So it's like it just has to be so gradual, and people rush that process massively. And then people also don't have the tools to manage the stress before the fall. So um, they rush that experience and they stay adverse to the experience instead of like creating a bit of space between whilst they're up there on the wall and when they let go. So I don't know if you've noticed this, but the thing that's the moments that are most scary are those before the fall. So it's like this apprehension of falling that's the most psychologically uncomfortable thing. So we have to stay in that space and manage that in order to get over the fear of falling. We can't just go up the wall and force ourselves to let go and then climb a bit higher and force ourselves to let go. We have to kind of breathe a little bit before we let go and kind of manage that space before the fall. So there's just a few ways that people kind of go wrong with it, but there's a few people like me trying to like work on psychology and climbing, but it just seems so like I read today that there's like a climbing gym that banned falling in the gym in the States.
What?
And you just like you're just asking people to get hurt because the thing is like falling's a physical skill as
Jesus
well that we
Christ.
need to practice. So like they're not allowed to fall at all in the gym. And then they go outside and climb on rock and they don't know how to fall. That all their legs are going to be tense, and then they're going to break their legs or their ankles or something. So it's just like we just have a weird mentality towards it, honestly, that needs to change.
Well, I totally agree, and I think the reason why I'm so happy that you're here tonight is because I was also getting for me I'm kind of getting sick of the fact that people are doing fingerboard training and challenges, and they're all people are doing also yoga and breathing exercises, but in general I guess the physical entry to something you might call it mastery is there's a very strong emphasis on this, and it's totally been overlooked that other areas are a lot more important. I was even looking at some coaching books from quite well-known people, and I don't need to say names, but the thing is like, there might be only one aspect of the psyche or one aspect of the mental things. The rest of the of the chapters are mainly coordination-based skills, strength, and you have like an overload of like 10 areas which are body skills, and then you have only maybe one or two areas which are mental or psychological skills or states, and it's just a shame because ultimately I totally agree. The fact that the mind plays such a big aspect of climbing, or in any sport where you have to push the boundaries. It could be anything, could be surfing, could be something where things might get tough because you are getting scared of something which nature throws at you, and then not having the skills or not being able to adapt slowly to it. It's a shame. And in normal sports science, this is a thing. This is a very standard theory from the easy to the hard. You teach somebody skills, any sport-based skills, from a very basic bottom, and then you automate very basic ideas, and then you make them harder, and then you put like variations in to make them harder. And you take years, for example, like skill-based sports like volleyball, for example, which are super difficult, in my opinion. You go really slow. You throw a ball to somebody else and they just have to catch the ball. And then you throw the ball back again, and you do this for a while. And it's just about getting your your senses used to the fact that there's a ball coming. It's okay. It's not going to kill you. It might break your nose, if you're not aware. But the thing is, like, you do it really easily. And I totally agree. That's such a nice insight you just been mentioning. That for falling, for example, it's like, why not start slow? Why not build and let go of this aspect of I have to really try hard, and if I just take, it's just a shame because ultimately, yes, it should be done slowly, it should be done soft, and then slowly, you become more comfortable with the fact that you might know that something might happen, and then it becomes okay, but it takes a while.
Yeah, it takes a long time. I think like one thing you mentioned there as well is like, you know, if you do look at other sports and you use the example of volleyball and you practice basic skills over and over again, that's called practice, right?
Yeah.
You will practice certain things in volleyball and then you go and play a match. And then you go to practice and training, and you practice and you train, and that's the bulk of the time that you spend, right? And you weed out weaknesses and you work on the things you're bad at, and then you go back and you play a match, and then you train and practice again. Whereas as climbers, every single time we go to the gym or the crag, for most of us, it's achievement time. It's like it's it's time for me to send every time. Like we don't really play as climbers and we don't practice. We're so hell bent on always getting to the top that we just miss this whole idea around what it means to kind of train and practice and be a master of your sport. And that's not always having your time be performance orientated. So you only have a few performances every now and again, but we consider our warm up to be a performance half the time, right? Like how many of us have big enough too big egos, we can't even say take on the warm up to like get the blood in our fingers or something, right? To make sure we don't injure ourselves. But like, no, I've got to hold on. And it's just like, sometimes it's because of the joy of just like the challenge, but sometimes it's just like because you're scared to be the person that said take on your warm up or something. It's just like, we can't be performing all the time. It's silly.
Yeah, it's super silly. Okay, this is the quote from Yvonne Chouinard about John Gill. John Gill was one of the first kind of boulderers in the States. He kind of started in the 50s and 60s bouldering, and everybody thought he was cuckoo. You know, it was like people like Yvonne, Tom Frost. I mean, a lot of people were like doing big walls, like stuff 800 meters high, and John decided to kind of like see this. And this is really interesting fact because he came from gymnastics. He was actually he was a gymnast, and he saw this more as a bodily kind of thing of pulling hard on small things and like only doing 3, 4, 5 meters. He loved overhangs, and this is what Yvonne Chouinard says about John Gill. Okay, and this is from the 70s in Yosemite, an interview. So Yvonne says, climbing is still in a stage of pure physical movement, and the next step is going to be mind control. I think Jill has already gone into that. From watching him prepare for a boulder, even in the late 50s, I would walk up to a boulder, this is Yvonne, and just do it. He would sit below a root, do his little breathing exercise, and get his mind prepared, like a weightlifter walking up to a set of weights, getting his mind calmed down and his body ready to go. I mean, this is like, I mean, we're talking about someone, I mean, Yvonne talking about John Gill in the 70s, and you know, when I read this, like last night, I was like, fuck, man. This is like 50 years ago and we're still not there yet.
I mean, how many boulders do you know who like calm their minds before they climb? I mean, I know a few, but not many.
No, not many.
I think, yeah, like reminding ourselves that we do climbing to improve our mental health, and then so often it has negative effects on our mental health and our mental well-being. Okay, and I think that we don't reflect enough and say, hang on a minute, is this thing that I have dedicated so much time towards, is that actually good for my mental well-being? Or am I like stressing over my project? Or am I stressing because I'm scared of falling, right? And then you're like, why do you do that? Like, it's my job, right? But for many people, it's not their jobs, it's their hobby. It's what they choose to do in their free time. And they spend all this money and they invest so much time in it. And then it's stressing them out. And that's kind of like my main drive as a coach, right? It's like, sure, if people get better at climbing, that's cool too. But the main like reason I get so much out of coaching is with the purpose of improving someone's well-being around climbing. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, let's move on. Chapter 3, we already covered chapter 2, emotions, negative thoughts. Chapter 3 would be your podcast with Mina.
Okay.
And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because, you know, one of your statements on your website with the podcast is like, you know, you wanted to do a podcast not in general about climbing. And why did you, this is a personal question, why did you kind of decide to focus on different topics?
They're just topics that interest us. Yeah, that's it really. Um, I don't read any books about climbing. I don't listen to any podcasts about climbing. I don't go on climbing websites. I follow climbers on Instagram and I sort of stay updated with what's going on through that. But any kind of extra reading or films that I watch are usually non-climbing
Yeah.
related, and they're the kind of the topics that interest me because they're not the things I do every day. But in some ways, it comes back to climbing, right? It's like these topics that are on the outer reaches of climbing, and affect us climbers, or some of us, or interest some of us. And yeah, that's just, yeah, we really just have no rules around it whatsoever. We just find people we are interested in talking to, who we think have something to say. So yeah, we've only had a few professional climbers on the podcast, for example. We've generally have people who aren't very well known. And yeah, we just talk about interesting stuff, and that's kind of it, really. There's nothing more to it than that.
Perfect. When did you start this project?
Um, oh, I'm not sure now. I think the first one came out in January. Yeah.
But this is a good thing. I mean, you can just choose whoever you want to put on, and you ask people, and then they might say yes or no, and that's great. So it's
Yeah. 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 There's no biggie. And if we want to break from it, we'll probably just stop it and then start it again. It's like, if people aren't paying for it, they can't expect stuff to come out super fast, right? And we can't put expectations on ourselves to put stuff out fast. And I think, like, we do need to change how we consume content on the internet. I think, I donate to or pay for some of my favorite podcasts, but
yeah.
I was paying for an Economist subscription, but then I canceled it because it's too expensive. But like, I should pay for my news. Like, if I want to get good news, that's a service. Like, why do I expect it to be free? And what are the consequences of it being free? So, yeah, I think we do need to change the way that we do that kind of thing. But it's really fun. Like, I love just an excuse to chat to someone, basically. I think it's great. Like, but also it's a different type of chat. Like, I interviewed Lynn Hill a few weeks ago, and if I were to run into her in like Boulder or something, we chat about like the weather or like COVID-19. I wouldn't ask her like questions you can ask on a podcast, or like the questions you've asked me today. You would not ask me those questions if you ran into me at the crag, right? So it's like this nice space to actually like have a deep conversation. And I just love that. I think it's great. So as long as I've got the time for it, I want to keep doing it.
The pleasures of modern technology, Hazel.
Would you think that was my connection or yours?
Must be the Welsh connection. It might
Probably is. I've never lost signal before. It's probably just Skype. You need to get on Zoom.
we have to discuss this later, because I have some interesting facts for you about Zoom.
Oh, is it bad privacy or something?
No, it's not about privacy. Oh, you're back again. You're still we're back again live. Okay, listen. I actually put in the picture now of Simon, and you can't see it, but I can see it. It's okay. This is very, very nationalistic, but I mean, this is okay. Simon made a really nice picture of you climbing the English flag.
Who's Simon?
my creative director, my art director.
Oh, right. Is he the one that made the globe as well?
No, he's not. No, he's stuck in Switzerland at the moment.
Cool.
Well,
nice.
There you go.
I like
there you
that
go.
flag.
Yeah, it's a cool flag because it's not too overimposing. I think it's quite a nice one. And Simon has been a star because usually he just either draws them live, within half an hour, or he just goes apeshit. So this is very nice of him. Okay, Hazel, this has been a great talk. Tonight we had a lot of fun. We've talked, no, I wouldn't call it fun. It was quite interesting, quite deep. I really appreciate the way you perceive the world, and I really appreciate that you actually, you're proposing a different way how we look at coaching. You're proposing a different way of what climbing can be and should be, or just can be, because I think there are different aspects, and I think it's very important to continue your quest.
I will. Well, thanks for having me on the show. And yeah, it was nice chatting.
Schnitzel Live, proudly presented to you by the beer who cannot be named.